Thank you. And as the slide says, questions, comments? Yes, thank you.
Can I ask, one thing that my students always ask is in regards to Germany. And with such a momentous occasion happening in the next 4 years, I just wanted to ask, you mentioned that Germany do become part of this, and I really see as the commemoration being about the reconciliation, about the rebuilding of Europe during this time and the rebuilding of relationships. With these events that are going to be happening throughout Europe over the next 4 years, what do you see as, is Germany willing to be a part of this, and how?
Thank you. And as the slide says, questions, comments? Yes, thank you.
Can I ask, one thing that my students always ask is in regards to Germany. And with such a momentous occasion happening in the next 4 years, I just wanted to ask, you mentioned that Germany do become part of this, and I really see as the commemoration being about the reconciliation, about the rebuilding of Europe during this time and the rebuilding of relationships. With these events that are going to be happening throughout Europe over the next 4 years, what do you see as, is Germany willing to be a part of this, and how is that all sort of working with regards to the relationships with the country?
On this question, I would say that we have to be very cautious and not to put in the same melting pot, I would say, First World War and Second World War. And not to, there would be a trick in trying to define or to figure out Germany, descripting Germany in the context of the Great War, in the same way it is described in the context of the Second World War. Two different stories, two different Germanys, two different regimes, etc., etc. The problem we are facing is that 2014 is a dual remembrance exercise. Centenary of the triggering of First World War, but also, and I should have mentioned it in the presentation, 70th anniversary of the D-Day. And so we have a difficulty, in not melting those two historical events and not putting the shame, the blame on Germany, and trying also to help the Germans in bearing their own history and sharing their own history between their page of First World War and the page of Second World War. The issue is very tricky in France, and even there was a public debate on whether or not celebrating, sorry, the expression is not accurate, commemorating at the same time the 70th anniversary of the D-Day, so the starting of liberating Europe from the Nazism, and the launching of the war, of the First World War. There were some voices in France saying that we have to combine the memory of those two historical events in precisely what you said, overtaking them, overcoming them, and showing how we came through this and how we reconciled with the Germans. Other voices expressed their concerns in possible confusion between the two, and the necessity in separating what belongs to Great War, what belongs to Second World War, and commemoration of the D-Day. We have to keep in mind also a fact that this would be probably the last possibility ever to gather on the Normandy beaches the surviving veterans from the Second World War. So, you know, the 80th anniversary, that will be probably none of them still alive. So we have to also take that in mind. And so, in France, we have taken two decisions. One administrative decision. You know, the mission in charge of the commemorations have the dual responsibility in organizing the full centenary commemoration, but also in charge of organizing the 70th anniversary of the D-Day. And the second decision is also to organize a big remembrance event on the 6th of June 2014, so 70th anniversary, with the gathering in France of all the leaders of the countries which have participated in the liberation of Europe. And we have also taken the decision for the first time to invite the Germans. Also, the President of the Republic of Germany, the Chancellor Merkel, will attend the D-Day commemoration so next June. And so it's to be short to respond to your question. We have to separate, you know, these two events, completely different context, but also to take the chance of what would happen in 2014 in inviting the Germans and showing that we have taken the lessons of history and we are in this reconciliation mood with the Germans. And I think it's completely shared by our German colleagues.
Yes, when it comes to Belgium, yes, the German will be associated to the celebration of World War I, and there will be a specific event around the German military century. Of course, there are Australian, American, Canadian centuries, but there are also German one. Many young soldiers spent there, and there will be a specific event around it.
Yes.
Thanks, Chris. Thank you very much for those talks, which I enjoyed. You both touched on your impressions of the role that the First World War plays in Australian public identity, I suppose. So in talking to people in Australia, you know, it often comes up and it's something that people feel a connection to. I wonder if you could expand a little bit on what role you think the First World War and indeed the commemorations will play amongst the general population of each of your countries. Right, because you've given us a good overview of the sort of official structures and the official program, but how does it bubble up, perhaps, from the population? What are vernacular responses to the First World War?
Well, for me, it's still a question mark how successful this whole program will be to draw the attention of the youth to an event which tend to disappear slowly into the past. It's true, when I was a kid, I played in the village band of the village, and we had still veterans there, and it was, you know, not their things, but okay, we were happy to participate. Now that they are all gone, there is, at least in Belgium, a risk of these events being forgotten. And the whole idea of this celebration is precisely to draw the attention of the youth on the historical importance, the sacrifice that I mentioned. But is it going to be successful? When you see the program and in the, I think in the information that you will receive, you have the links on the brochure made by Flanders, and you have a lot of events which are very modern. In their concept, it's not traditional celebration with military parades, but that you have contemporary artists that have been associated to that. For instance, for the use of gas, you have an olfactive artist, somebody who works with smells, and so it's very innovative. And with that, we hope to draw more attention. But of course, we have to see. I could answer your question in 2018.
I'll come back to you then.
Just one more comment. I think the two perspectives are completely different. You know, whether you are in Australia or in Europe, I would say France, because I'm less aware of the situation in other European countries. In Australia, it's very, very, very striking. You know, when you come as an external observer, as we are. First, we are very much impressed by the intensity of the fever during the Anzac Day. It's something absolutely incredible. The crowd gathered for these events, the fact that people wake up in the morning for the dawn service, etc. And not only, I would say, sorry to say that quite bluntly, white Australia, but also new Australia, you know. And so it's very much connected to the storytelling of your nation, you know, how to, through war, through Anzac symbolism, to create this reflex of national history and identity. Of course, in old nations like mine, like France, it's completely another story. It's, you know, an event like, I wouldn't say many others, but a phase is in our long time of, you know, centuries and centuries of history. And if the memory is still there because grandparents have been killed or wounded, etc., and every family confronted still with the ghosts of the Great War, I share the point of Jean-Luc. We have to avoid, you know, this process of time passing and erasing the impact, the effect of the Great War, and so working on the youth in our countries, you know. So it's completely different. Here it's part of the storytelling of your nation. In France, it's making sure that the Great War will never be forgotten. Never be forgotten.
And another element also is that we are maybe now a bit late, but stressing certain elements which have been overlooked in the past in more traditional commemoration ceremonies, like the role of women. I mean, these things were basically a male affair, and now it has. So we are trying to highlight, like here in Australia, I was in Sydney last week to attend the performance of Black Diggers. It's something also new in Australia, and it's quite telling that the Governor General was there, the Governor of New South Wales, the Governor of Victoria, the Premier. So that is recognition that these Aboriginal who fought had also their story, and that it should be recognized. In Belgium, we are also highlighting certain aspects that have been overlooked in the past. Also the importance of humanitarian law, and that it's really the first war that when rescue to wounded soldiers started to be organized in a more systematic way. Of course, it started at the Battle of South Arino, if I remember well, but it was very beginning. This was maybe the first time when it was done on a large scale and more organized scale. So these factors are stressed because they are maybe perceived as more relevant today.
But you don't want to glorify what happened. You talk about the message for young people, but what's the message that you want them to have?
As far as Belgium is concerned, is how can we do to make sure that we avoid wars in the future? So it's basically not only, but there is a strong pacifist overtone. And so first, how, you know, what was this war? How can we describe it? How horrible it was? And how can we do to avoid this? And that was all the element I mentioned earlier, all the context that you can create to have a peaceful world. And this is really the basic message is that, without forgetting, of course, the gratitude, the recognition for the sacrifice made, but why is it made for? not to achieve a victory against an enemy, but to have peace.
Very much the same, very much the same. Just for the younger generation to be well aware of the incredible sacrifice paid by the whole society. You know, the figures, I mean, we just have to keep that in mind, you know, and compare them to the population of that time. France was a country of 30 million people at the beginning of the 20th century. We had 1.5 million dead. We had 3.5 million wanted, plus all those people who have disappeared, knew where they are, where they were, etc. Plus the impact on the society, you know, on the destruction of villages, of infrastructures, of the economy. And it took us probably 1 or 2 generations to recover. And in a way, we still can also ask us, do we have recovered from the Great War? Or are we still paying the price, you know, due to this immense burden, which was the reconstruction of a torn away country, which was the state of France on the day of the armistice, 12th of November 1918. And so just for the younger generation to be aware of not only the price of blood, but you know, the price paid by the nation, I think this is the first message. And the second message, which is very much connected to the current situation in Europe, is to, from the centenary, from the commemoration, how can we revive the faith and the hope in the European project? And how can we use commemorations as a way to better share what represents today the European project in the context of Europhobia, Euroscepticism, etc. That was the topic of your day yesterday. Not easy task. Yeah?
Other comments, questions? Ben.
I'm chipping with one, please, Bruce. Just as an aside on the notion of Australia as a young country and France as an old one, I might suggest that modern Australia that we can date to 1788 is 1 year older than modern France.
Yeah, good point.
My main point is about commemoration fatigue. Both of you have said, you know, this is a 4-year program. So, I mean, from a teaching point of view, you can plan quite far ahead. But there is going to be a lot of commemorations, and as you said, Ambassador Romatet, it's overlaid on existing commemorations. The example I want to press you on then in that regard is this. We've spoken about the Germans, I think we need to speak about the British. Right? So the British are not doing anything in 2015 for the Great War so much because they want to commemorate the Battle of Waterloo, which of course took place just outside of Brussels. So my question then is, what kind of involvement...
come today.
But this kind of clouds the European message, doesn't it? So what kind of involvement does the Belgian and French governments have to cooperate with those British plans for 2015?
You know, it's very strange. You know, I can't explain it. Of course, I can explain it. We have completely shadowed. You know, we are in the process of commemorating the second centenary of the Napoleonic epopea, but we have completely concealed those commemorations. So Waterloo wouldn't be very much celebrated in France, I can assure you. Neither Trafalgar has been. No, this is one reflection. You know, as you are reflecting on this issue of memory, modern memory, This is the issue of selective memory. The way we select in commemorating the events which we think are needed today for our own domestic, political, internal agenda. And this is the case in France, with the Great War. Look at what President Hollande, when he launched the commemorations in November 2014, so just 2 months ago, the way we will use the commemorations in celebrating national unity in a context in which France, is trying to come out from its crisis, its projection in Europe, etc. So, internal domestic political agenda, the Great War as a tool in magnifying national unity. The way we completely escaped the Napoleonic epoch, also for political reasons, republic against empire. And the way the British, on the contrary, will use that, of course, to annoy the French, and also, to magnify their own imperial history. So, selective memory, and we pick up in the events of the history, which events are more consistent or useful for our own internal purposes.
And just to copy, in Belgium it will be, I don't think there will be any political content in that, but more there will be a magnificent reenactment of the battles for the history buff and people who like to see, to try to imagine how the battles at that time could look like. It would be a wonderful opportunity to go with your kids. In Belgium, but it was before independence that it took place, so there is no, it doesn't play a real strong part in our national symbolism. We were very much divided towards the French invasion. Napoleon has, modernized Belgium a lot. We still have the provinces, are the provinces as he designed them, not the provinces from the Middle Ages. We still have the Napoleonic code, civil code as a basis for those. But of course it was a violent occupation. So we see it more from a neutral point of view without strong symbolic value, but it's a wonderful opportunity to draw tourism and to have a nice historical reenactment.
But the issue is, would the British, commemorate Azincourt 1415, so 600 anniversary next year, eradication of the French chivalry. Another example of selective memory.
Yes, and then.
Yes. Could I just throw in an aside to this? 2 years ago, I happened to go to St. Paul's Cathedral here for a morning service with all this naval work there, and I thought, strange, I can't remember what's the celebration, and they commemorated a special church service for the Battle of Trafalgar. And all the naval cadets and everything that was Navy turned up in the cathedral, and I thought, I didn't realise Australians were celebrating that, but it's Church of England, so it was a surprise for me. But I don't know how many other Australians were aware of that.
Not I.
Being Swiss and neutral, I see lovely reactions here between British and French people, and for us educators, isn't that an opportunity now to actually see, not just to use the word care and love, and how do we behave against each other, and how we use now these words as opportunities to bring into the classroom. Wasn't that a classic?
Well, care and love.
No, but what I mean is...
Ben and I, no problem. Between the French and the British.
You mean you just have a nice glass of wine and just, Yes.
Yeah.
I've seen them do this before.
I'm not saying, you know, it's lovely to say, you know,
Yeah.
but for us educators, it's nice to see these behavior patterns, how deep they go. You know, the reality is they go very deep.
Mm.
You know, although this man lives 14 years here, but he's still British as ever. And over there we have a French man. You know, I mean, it's amazing, you know, and so, but also very interesting. And I think we should take these values into the classroom and teach our kids. You know, that even though it doesn't matter how deep your roots go, it's a give and take.
There is a political challenge here, isn't there? I think it's very, your conversation you're having now follows very much on from where we finished yesterday, because yesterday morning we had a series of conversations about the evolution of the EU and the current situation in the EU. In the afternoon we ended up talking about the tensions between the nationalist populist politics that are emerging in parts of Europe and the challenge for the EU, especially with the European elections this year, as to how those nationalist tendencies might play out. And it seems to be part of the challenge for countries such as France and Belgium and the UK in 1914-18 is how do you value and give space to that kind of national unity motive that you just referred to, still at the same time wanting a message about Europe and about the priority of the European project. And there's a tension in that dynamic for President Hollande, as well as for ambassadors, that's not necessarily easy to negotiate, I imagine.
You're absolutely right, Bruce. We are in a phase, but this is not the issue of the day. Ben, I can come back next year if you want. Some comments on Europe, you know, today, through crisis and to rebirth, probably. We are in a process of, there are tendencies of deconstructing Europe today because of the waves of populism in our public opinions, because of the attitudes of governments following their own opinions and seeing Europe only as a minimal denominator. And the issue today is how to revive the dream of the fathers of Europe in terms of a global project with a global European interest, overcoming nationalistic, national egotist interest of the European nations. This is the key philosophical issue for European leaders. And in a way, but I don't know, it's too early to say, in a way, remembrance of World War I could help by comparing the situation of Europe today to what it was a century ago, in reviving, in a way, a kind of feeling of European interest. Of course, it's probably a bit too optimistic, but I think this is a goal we have to try to reach. And it could help, you know, reviving the good old spirit of the founding fathers.
It was a very interesting process to be working through it.
Yeah, and I think also speaking about the strength of symbolism and selective memory, I think we should also take this opportunity to have a more voluntaristic approach in terms of education to have a European perspective. For instance, I have been taught history through all elementary and high school through the history of Belgium, which is absurd in a way. You know, it's the ambassador of Belgium who says it, but it's very artificial. And only after school, I started reading the history of Europe, which makes more sense because you have a larger whole, and so you can see more clearly some movements. And of course, when you have national history textbooks, they stress all the victories, you have a very limited vision, and you tend later on to analyze politic events through that prism. So I think it's very important to also the media. We are also very, we analyze everything through our national media, and they all have a very strong bias. You have some initiative like Arte, which is a real, or Euronews, which are really European medias. And I was struck, I saw on Arte, for instance, a TV program about the end of World War I and the Versailles Treaty, but to Germanize how the country was in disarray at that moment, the empire had fallen, how the government was, they could not sign the treaty and come back to the Republic of Vienna, how they were threatened by the communist revolution, all things that you tend to avoid when you see it from a Belgian or French perspective. All the internal difficulties of accepting this peace, and I found it very, very, very interesting. And I think there is a key there to develop more media, more textbooks, which develop the European perspective.
Yeah.
There was a time that a few books, everything was European, and now it's slowing down. We are a bit forgetting that, and I think it is the key, because if all European students have the same textbooks or similar textbooks with the same dates, the same more objective view of events and of the very nationalistic Jeanne d'Arc, and we have got Bouillon, the first king of Jerusalem. Things are, when you see this, it's very a very narrow-minded approach to history, and it doesn't help to create European citizens. Yeah. You have to start from the beginning, from elementary school to high school.
May I also mention one thing? I think I'm truly with that. I think you have a key responsibility as educators, teachers, etc. And I think your responsibility is precisely to avoid what I mentioned earlier, any attempt to distort history for national purposes. And I think your responsibility is to pass to the new generations history as it was, without any glorification, without any pantheonization, whatever, magnifying, such or such event, but presenting history as it occurred, in its atrocities, and also in the lessons we can today bear from those difficult times. And I think really educators and teachers in the centenary context have a key responsibility in forming the new generations to this spirit of what was the sacrifice our societies endured, our grandparents endured, and also telling the story and how to avoid once again what happened. And just to finish, in 1918, the motto was "Never again, never again." But once again, it came. So once again, onto the bridge, dear friends. Or once again. So I think really your responsibility is absolutely central in the commemoration process.
Yes, thank you.
It occurred to me before that that idea of the Europe project being something that can be supported by looking at the connections of the different countries in the war and why, but by drawing parallels to Greece, which could have become a rogue state, but then and seeing the dangers for that in the countries around, or the sort of rise of fascism from the people, to how different countries during the Second World War had felt. And also, looking at, I had a Spanish friend who was saying, how come Germany now is rising on top of the European Union and feeling that sort of sentiment of, domination again, but realizing that the EU is giving us this sort of blanket of that it is formed based on the fact of keeping peace, and that it is to be continued to keep the peace and to look after each other. I think that could be a very simple and strong message to keep for the European citizens to understand why, throughout this commemorative period.
Yeah.
I'm not sure how the French and Belgian students feel about other countries and still staying together, what the level of skepticism is, but in relation to peace and conflict and domination.
You know, it took 2 generations to build Europe as it is today. So the generation of the 50s and the 60s, generation of the leaders of that time, and the second generation, 70s, 80s, or 90s, which brought Europe to the state of it is today. And I think there is an historical responsibility for any European leader not to backtrack, because backtracking would be going back to the past, to its ghosts, to its dark pages, etc. And so commemorations, First World War, Second World War, could be also a good occasion for our leaders to see what is their historical responsibility in continuing the dream of the 2 generations of the past leaders, and maintaining this spirit, this idea that beyond nations there is a global European interest which has been a bit faded away in the past years. And so I strongly believe that we have to put back the European project in its historicity in a way, and not only a day-by-day problem, a day-by-day issue, but as a long-term construction which should mobilize the leaders of our nations with the aim as I mentioned all, never again. And so, when we hear speaking about domination of one country compared to the other ones, this is a good way of reviving the ghost of the past. And the idea of Germany, dominating once again in different forms Europe could revive, all these wants of the 20th century. So we have to be very, very careful.
Maybe if I could add something about this anti-European sentiment. In Belgium, you don't have, since we've been the battlefield of Europe for almost 2 millennia now, so everybody is adhering to the European project. You have this tendency from politicians when you have to, and when they have budget problems, to say, the Commission is imposing that, like the father who would be a bad manager saying it's the bank, it's not me. The bank is asking me to deprive you from food. But if there is a debate, it is against a certain form of Europe, where Europe perceived as too much liberal or too much socialist, according to the political division. But nobody is really questioning the European construction project. But it doesn't mean, of course, that it can always slip very quickly, and it's so easy. Of course, if you're asking the Greeks to make enormous sacrifice, it's always easier to tell them that it's not their own fault, that it's the German who are trying to impose. And so it's so easy to propose this simplistic solution, which is no solution, but it's so dangerous. And so we have to remain very, very careful.